I'm really excited to do this presentation. I found it a really wonderful learning experience for myself, even though I've been painting Hallingdal since very first. That was my first style that I learned. And it was kind of bucking the trend back in '74 because Rogaland was what everyone was painting, and I wanted to do Hallingdal. So I ended up kind of having to teach myself. And of course, we didn't have all these color prints and cameras and things that we have now. So it was really hard, but I'm glad I persevered. And so that was my favorite style back when I started, and it actually still is. There's just something about it that appeals to me. And so what I'm hoping through today's presentation is that I share what I love about Hallingdal. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to chime in either during or after. Josh has been terrific, and Jennifer. Anytime I have questions, Jennifer's always there. And Josh has been super helpful with the technology because, like everyone else, I'm still kind of learning as I go.
All right, just center composition slide coming up for you.
Okay. I will say that when I started this, I asked for what was Hallingdal in the museum, and Jennifer sent me over, I think, over 100 pictures, Jennifer. And I had to weed them down into something manageable. And Hallingdal, of all the styles, has the most variation within that style. And so I kind of decided, not knowing who was going to be in this or watching, that I would kind of divide it up. This is just a arbitrary thing that I came up with in my mind to kind of divide up the different kinds of compositions that you will find in Hallingdal. And of course, there's always things that break the rules. It's not a rule, like I said, it's just something I came up with. It's an arbitrary division to help you understand a little bit better. So the first thing, there are lots and lots of bowls and round objects in the museum. And so I started with one of the ways I identify Hallingdal is to have a center motif surrounded by either more flowers or scrolls as a ring around. And this one is from, Josh, the names aren't showing up on my screen or the dates. I don't know if that's a problem.
They're showing up on mine, and so hopefully everybody else can see them. But this one is well, at least the center motif we think is done by Nils Berra.
And you can see the center flower, and then you can see the ring of scrolls, which are not the typical scrolls that we associate with Hallingdal, but this piece is painted from, what's the date on this one, Jennifer? Possible date?
The date is 1836.
Okay,
so that's what it says on the outside of the bowl.
I don't know, because my collage of people's faces is covering it. That's why I asked. It also shows, easy for everyone to see, is that Hallingdal does not normally have a lot of shading. What they have is larger motifs. And within that motif, there will be more detail, sometimes an overabundance of detail. And then the colors that they use, they achieve a sense of your eye see shading because they use complementary colors. So if you look around the scroll, there is a little bit of shading in that white middle cone from that motif on the outer edge. Then there's black cross hatching, but inside the leaves that are coming out, there are blue lines on the dark blue leaves. And then on the light blue leaves, there are red detail. And that is not something that we would normally think of. And I also think that that center ring of flowers surrounding that green and the green circle with the white flower is gold leaf. If you, next time I go, I'm so excited to go back, whenever that is. I need to pull this one out because I really think looking at it, it looks like it's gold leaf. Especially on this one detail, you can kind of see that it's kind of a chipped off square, and you don't normally see that. And then if you also look at some of the red detail on that gold leaf, it does not follow the gold leaf exactly. And it's just a graceful stroke, and that's how we mostly do Rosemaling.
I'll just quick chime in here for one thing. If folks, you're having trouble seeing any of the slides, I encourage you to go into full screen mode on your screen. And then in the corner or on the side, you'll see the film strip of people. And if you're in full screen mode, you can minimize that, and then you'll be able to see a little bit more of the screen.
Okay, here's another very simple design that is just really elegant. It's just, to me, this design really epitomizes what Rosemaling is and folk art. And you'll notice that, especially in the motifs, Josh, can we flip to the enlargement right away? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so if you look at the black tulip leaves, you'll see blue and white outlining. Blue is the dark color, white is the light. And there's a little bit of shading. They use the blue and yellow to create a green. And then on the red leaves coming out of the tulips, you'll see blue and white again as an outlining. And the teardrops are not the way we normally associate. Yeah, they're very graceful, and they're very, very, very beautiful. They're very light against the heaviness of the large motifs, but it works. Here's another one. Instead of a flower in the center, they have just a circle with cross hatching, which is very, very common, with all kinds of little details inside the cross hatching. And again, on these flowers that surround it, it's actually a repetition. And there's not as much color variation. And if you notice, there is no shading at all on this one. And it's not black outline, and there's no teardrops. This one is painted by Olaf Fenton. Is that right, Jennifer?
Yes, that's
okay.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Right, 1849. An extremely graceful painter. And this is one of my all-time favorites in the museum, whether it's Gubenstahl or anything else. I just love how open this design is. And there are not a lot of loose teardrops coming out of things. There's no shading, cross-hatching in the center of the flower, and a lot of the detail is faded away already from the use. And it's a very, very simple color palette. It's almost monochromatic, but that's because those painters in the 17 and 1800s had a very limited palette. They used things that were easily available. They didn't have art stores that they could just walk into and buy ready-made paint. So they were probably using powdered pigments and then mixing them by themselves with their linseed oil. So this would have been yellow ochre or some kind of yellow with possibly indigo, because I'm not sure that Prussian blue was even made in 1849, or if they would have had the funds to buy it, because it wasn't readily available, not naturally, whereas indigo was. This one shows the center motif as well with a flower. It's very worn, so it's hard to see. It's almost monochromatic. Only instead of a ring, there is a ring of things around it, but they're growing out on vertical, or, more of a geometric, that's what I was trying to think, more of a geometric pattern. And there's very few teardrops in here. I would have liked to have seen this when it was new. Yeah, that's it. The next bowl also has, I think, gold leaf in the center, which they used sometimes because it made the, oh, okay, Jan's got a comment. Very good, Jan, thank you. The gold leaf would have made their ale look really beautiful and inviting to drink, never mind how it tasted. So you've got the center flower with a ring of scrolls going in, and then a ring around the outer edge. These colors, I don't know if they're faded or if this is how it was when it was brand new. But again, it's just blues and greens on the red with the yellow because they often use red or yellow, warm colors in their bowls for the ale. It's a shallow bowl, and it's by John Gunderson from the 1970s. And this has very limited colors as well. But what I really love about this one is the way he used small scrolls with large S leaves coming out of the scrolls, and his center flower, he's got enough detail. There's not a lot of contrast with the line work, except that his teardrops in the center actually form a secondary or a third flower. They do their own shape, so that's a great use of negative space. But you have to be really careful when you plan out and paint something like this. It'd be almost impossible to do freehand because of the accuracy that you need for the center flower to match up with all those scrolls. The flowers are not what I would normally consider Hallingdal flowers, but they did use them sometimes. They're just not very common. This is by Addie Piddleco from Minnesota, one of the very earliest gold medalists. And again, they see the flower, and the scrolls coming out are on a very definite geometric axis rather than a flowing ring. This bowl is by Irene Lamont from 1984, and this is the bowl that got her gold medal. I think it was also the first time at Vesterheim that a piece got first place, best of show, and people's choice. So this has more shading, but that is what Irene is known for, is her shading. And it's just blue, yellow, and white for the actual Rosemaling motifs, and the red comes solely from the background. And you see in the middle her large flower with the scrolls going around. And since bowls are, with the white and the yellow as the shading, and some dark blue and black, the tiny teardrops that are in the inside curve of the scroll might not even be black. They might be her dark blue. She often used that. And then she uses the rope and the blue line because that is the area that is hardest to paint. So you do the large motif in the center, and then high up on the side of the bowl, you do whatever you're going to do. This is a bowl by Nils Ellensgaard, and this one has the large black teardrops that I so love and look beautiful on a red background. And for those of you who are painters, his teardrops are not solid. You can see spaces between each stroke, so that background kind of shows through. He didn't paint those red lines. He's just doing graceful strokes. And if you go through and try and look, each of those petals strokes is different. I mean, he's got the same basic shape, but you can't go and say the one on the top left is exactly the same on. They're all slightly different, and that's part of the great thing about Rosemaling. Again, this is a really limited color scheme: the yellow, the blue, the white, and black on a red background, which is probably the most common background and color palette in Hallingdal. This bowl is by Shirley Evanstad, who actually studied with John Gunderson for a while, and then they kind of mentored each other, so to speak. And she, again, has the beautiful different flower in the center, and her designs around the outside are not, they're also on a geometric type axis. And it's a different color scheme with that particular green on the yellow, but it works. I threw this in for those of us who aren't painters, because when we're painting, we need to look at an object as a whole. So this painter put a texture on the underside of, or outside of the bowl, and a lot of us just ignore the outside. So I thought, that's a pretty good way. And this is an older bowl, so it's nice to know, and it's a faux technique. And I think I know what they did, how they did it. Similar to what I learned last year in Sweden. So I think that's the last of our round center composition. These are mirror image because a lot of the things that are like trunks and cupboards and things are horizontal and vertical. So they're often a mirror image, or the flowers or scrolls are stacked. They're not just in a circle. So this trunk. I don't know do you know who painted this one, Jennifer?
Yeah, yes, it's by Torstein Sand, and it's the date on the trunk itself that's painted is 1859.
Okay, so you can see how worn off it is. Again, red background, blue, white, and yellow. And they get the green by mixing the blue and the yellow. So especially, could we go to the enlargement? So if you can see on the scrolls that are towards the bottom, the left and right side, it looks as if the scrolls may have either been blue or yellow. It's hard to tell, but you can see some remnants of the color. But instead of using black or white for detail, we used that bright blue and yellow. Yeah, there's the blue outlining stroke. And the scrolls are not the way we typically think of scrolls, especially if we're thinking telemark. So the scrolls in Hallingdal tend to be wider and chunkier and more rounded. And the teardrops, especially towards on the inside, if you look at the little leaf petals that are there, are not teardrop shapes. They're almost like little tiny, they look like leaves rather than just a teardrop. And the top rose or tulip is a traditional Hallingdal flower. It's as if you're seeing the flower just cut right in half and you're seeing the center and the outer petals. This is a typical Hallingdal design as well, where they're using people in the middle and they surround it by stacked flowers. There really are no scrolls. There's leaves on here. And again, a very, very simple palette with almost no shading at all. I'm assuming that that tan color that's there, some of that might have been red at one time. Okay, this little tankard. Jennifer, do you have the dates on this one?
Yep, this one is 1800.
Okay, wow. I think it's really beautiful. It's really crowded, but they use the space. And this shows exactly what Hallingdal does, where they make a larger motif. And especially if we look at the center flower and leaves, there's all kinds of detail in there, right? And even the scrolls that are coming out along the bottom that are just above, yeah, you can see all kinds of little detail in there. It's scaled down, of course, to fit. And he's used a little bit of cross-hatching to fill space. And the colors are, there is some red on this, but otherwise it's blue and yellow and white. For those of you who are painters and you have trouble with scrolls sometimes, this was one of my favorite things when I found it, because I was having a lot of trouble with the tops of the scrolls, the ends of the scrolls. And I thought, you don't have to end it in a knot. You can put something else in. So I was really intrigued with this. And it's also got some different flowers. If we can just quick switch to the top, and then, yeah, this is, he used the small dot fingerprint flowers for the ends of the scrolls here, but the inside, he's got yellow flowers on top of scrolls. And we don't normally think of putting things on top. We think of everything has to just be abutting or just next to or connected to. We don't think, oh, maybe we could put it on top. And this helps give this design a layered depth that some of the other designs don't. And if we switch to the enlargement, Josh, okay, you can really see on the left side of it, the detail that's in that center rose with the fan of flowers across the top. And instead of doing black outlining, he's using yellow for that row of leaves along the top. And those are very typical Hallingdal type flower leaves. They don't necessarily use a lot of teardrops. And then the center has that big 3-leaflet. And on this, the center motifs, he's got yellow and white, or yellow and light blue for outlining. And on the right side, you'll see all kinds of detail on the long S leaves and scrolls that are coming out. And the flowers, the side flowers, the secondary flowers, are what's called a pinwheel flower. And modern painters don't seem to paint that very much. Yeah. But it was used, and it's a typical Hallingdal flower. You won't find a pinwheel flower, for example, in Telemark. I don't know about Vesterheim because I don't paint it that much. So this and the big blue leaves coming out of the center flower on the right panel are also, there's some groups of docked the leaves coming out of the top, Josh. Yeah, there's groups of 4 dot flowers. So this has a lot of possibilities, and I would maybe not use every single thing on this if I had a smaller design, but if I was doing a big trunk, I might consider using all of these ideas.
And Patty asked if maybe you know, or if you want to guess if fingers were used for the small flowers.
They sometimes were, yes. It's just, and yeah, the flowers that are the ends of the scrolls, you can on the front panel on the right hand side, he outlined them. On the panel that's on the top on the left hand side of your screen, he did not outline them. But they do use, and those yellow flowers that are on top of blue, dark blue or black scrolls are also done with the fingerprint. I do it, but I do it very carefully. And sometimes I wear a glove or some kind of barrier cream. Okay, this Kubistol is very, very colorful, but that is the state of paints in the early 1900s. I believe this is Jennifer?
Yep, this one is 1914. So the Kubistol itself is much older, but it got a facelift. Right.
So I picked this because it's got so many of the typical Hallingdal motifs. But to me, it's kind of gaudy, but that's the state of paint back then. They used that background as more than likely an enamel paint, and it's very hard to paint on top of. And I don't know if the particular artist just didn't shade a lot, or if he just didn't, whatever it was, but I would not use every single thing in this Kubistol. There's a ton of great ideas. I've used some of these things. If we look at the front of the chair and the flower that's on the backrest, there are an arch of green petals, a row of green petals, right? And there's some little detail inside there, some little tiny dot flowers that are just in the shape of a circle. And I've used that. So if you are a painter, you can use this for inspiration and just pick out the things that impress you or that you like and use just those things. You don't have to use everything that's here. To me, this is a resource guide for possible ideas for how to do the space. And again, it shows large spaces, large motifs with no shading, and then detail. If we look at the back, the green, Josh, there are 3 big black leaves that surround the center motif. And they have very interesting motifs inside of them. And then you can see the idea that it's a mirror image, because you can take a line down the middle and then it's the same thing on the left as it is on the right. And there's also a lot of on the top, whether the front or the back that you're looking at, the very top flower, the flowers are stacked, and the very top flower has all these kind of pointed, severely pointed or extremely pointed petals. Mm-hmm. And it uses white outlining, which is very common on a dark background in Hallingdal. This bowl was painted by Sheila Stillen, and I think it got her gold medal in 1994. She doesn't paint anymore because she became allergic to all the paints. But this is the mirror image, because if you do the way the bowl is laid out on your screen, a horizontal access line, then the left and the right, top and bottom, are exact images of the other. And one of the things, I think they are, Jennifer. Can you answer Kim's question?
The photos are not all available on our online collections. We just have a smattering of those available, but some are available online. And but you can always ask for an image from us if you'd like to use that for study.
Or you go down to the study center yourself and you ask Jennifer, who is ever helping, to pull out Sheila Stillen's bowl. And then you take your own pictures.
And we can talk a little bit more about that towards the end. Okay.
Anyway, I want you to take a look at the black leaves that are coming out. She has a ring towards the bottom, a semicircle, a spray at the bottom, and then two smaller sprays coming out from the top. And she has those black leaves outlined in red with yellow center detail. Yeah. And her leaves are not just teardrops. She actually has very few actual teardrops, the way we think of them for Rosemaling. And also the petals at the top of that rose almost look as if they're, I can't think of the word, they look like flames. And that is, I wouldn't say it's common in Hallingdal, but I have seen it several times. So it's a beautiful color combination. Okay, the painter of this, surprisingly, is Vi Thody. And I included it because before she did Rogaland, she was doing both Telemark and Hallingdal. And this is an example of her Hallingdal. And it's very definitely a mirror image. So what's on the left is on the right based on the vertical axis. And the big black small leaves beneath the scrolls on the very bottom are very, very typical Hallingdal flower leaves. And the only teardrops that are in here are small. This one is Herbansata. It's not exactly mirror image, but when you have a piece like this and you're designing it to fit your shape, you do what you have to do. And this is also very simple. It's just blue, white, and yellow on the red background. And the teardrops are kind of big. And the flower is very, very simple. The white flowers around the ring and even the blue petals. There is no outlining on those. This one's not mirror image, but I'm including it because it's super graceful. So a lot of Hallingdal doesn't have any movement in the design at all, but this does. He's even painted something along the spout of his tankard, and you can see kind of impressions in it. And that's because this tankard is older than the painting. So they rescued it, cleaned it up, and then decorated it. So next time you go to Goodwill or you're at a rummage and you find a piece of woodenware you love and you strip it down and put Rosemaling on it, you're right in with the same ethic that they had: reuse, recycle, and make it beautiful. The colors are, this little lid has so much that's really cute. And the flowers coming out of the little green scrolls are just growing right out of it. There's no stem, there's no, that is typical of some of the things that were in Hallingdal. It looks pink because I think the white is fading, But the thing I really love on this piece is that beautiful yellow, those leaves at the top of the flower. They're so graceful with that outlining that or detail that is inside of it. That is just gorgeous. Right?
And there was a question about carving under the paint. And this is what you were talking about, right, Pam? These
Right.
little-
Yeah. I don't know if it's carving so much as possibly stamped somehow to, emboss on the wood. I don't know what that's called.
Yeah, I just answered. It's either like an incised line, some of it could be burnt decoration with a hot tool, to create that, which would be a stamp too. So yeah, we don't know exactly what it looks like under that dark paint.
Yeah, it's very bright. Rococo is very, very common in Hallingdal painting. A lot of people didn't realize that. When Nils did his books, they're written in Norwegian, and unless you can read Norwegian or there's a translation or you get somebody to translate, we don't always know everything that's in there. We went by the pictures. But Rococo was very commonly used in Hallingdal. And once you go to Norway and you see all the things that are there, then you realize how important it is. And I think the first thing that's Herbert Sada, Jennifer?
Yes.
Okay. And I do believe that he is one of Nils's ancestors. And if you look at the date, it's 1787. And I think the spray of scrolls, leaves, whatever that is, around the top of that red flower is gold. It's just that it's faded. Or maybe it was that way. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell. It's an extremely beautiful piece. And I'm including it. The flower in the center is not a real typical Hallingdal flower, but the piece itself, the way it's painted, is Rococo. And Nils said that Herbert Sada was considered in Norway the Rococo master. So it's wonderful that the museum has a piece by him, and we don't have to go all the way to Norway to see his work. This bowl is by Lars Satoyen, I think it's pronounced, not sure. He is a relative of Nils, a cousin or something. And this is, I'm debating whether to put this with the Rococo or the center composition, because you have a center flower or multiple flowers, and then a ring of scrolls going around it. And the scrolls come in on every different direction. They don't all go, and you can't find a root and then every single thing flows out of it. It's more like you see the center of the flower. Can we switch to the detail, the enlargement, Josh? Yeah, on the left. Some of the leaves and flowers or scrolls come out of the side of a petal. There, yeah, right there. And it's the middle of the petal. It's not even out of the little V that's there. Yeah, it's just the middle of the petal. And then one scroll starts out as an S. And the next leaf, red leaf, the yellow scroll. Then there's a red leaf that comes, but it drops down. It does not keep going all around, right? And on the other side. And there is a lot of cross-hatching. This is probably, Hallingdal does cross-hatching to give weight and fill in empty spaces. A lot. And the other thing that also makes it kind of Rococo is the fact that it's weighted. And it looks like things are heavy on one side, but then light on the other, or the weight of them is pushing them down and they meet or just overlap or abut. And it's actually very simple color combinations. It's just red, yellow, blue, and white. And it's probably palette mixed. This is one of my favorite pieces, and I've used this quite a bit. I'm not exactly sure if this is Hallingdal or not. I think it says Hallingdal, and somebody else thought it was Telemark. But the flowers are very definitely Hallingdal. And inside, the scrolls come from everywhere, and the leaves, and they just kind of keep growing and expanding. So there's large motif areas, and this is on a trunk. So when you see it in the museum, it's in the Study Storage Center. There is so much detail. Is there an enlargement of this one, Josh? Yeah. There's so much detail inside those triangular or C shapes. Yeah, you can see flowers and leaves that they're just done with line work. And unusually, there is some shading inside. So it's like they were a white or a very dark, dark white. And one side of it was shaded with red. And the same thing on the flowers, but the flowers are very, very simple. The attention is on the scrolls. Yeah. And there are seams growing out of the bottom on the sides. It took me a while to notice that. Yeah, like a chinoiserie type of thing. Okay, so I didn't realize Josh was going to do what the heck is this, but it's good because that was my question. You're going to see. Okay, so you're wondering why this is included. That's because this is the front, and I don't know if it's Hallingdal or not. I think the records from the museum say it was painted by a Hallingdal painter, or at least a painter from Hallingdal.
Yep, it came to the museum from the Hallingdal Folk Museum. So that's what we know.
Okay. Now that really surprises me that it came from the Hallingdal Museum. The long S sleeves coming out of the top with the little turnover type thing are more typical of Valdres, but some of the flowers are Hallingdal. And then if you look at the top, that has nothing to do with the front. I sometimes wonder, I thought maybe it might have been painted after if the top got worn off or something, but it's got the same blue leaves on, there's that big, beautiful star flower in the center. And on the very ends of it, the horizontal axis, there are two fingerprint flowers with that long S leaf with the white turnover. And this is just red and blue and white. I don't see much yellow, but maybe it's faded. And that star motif is very, very common on Hallingdal designs, especially when this is both a center composition and a mirror image. So it's like, okay, what is that? The top and the front don't match. And that is also true of the next piece coming up. This is the side, and the other side is the same, and the back. So they painted everything on this trunk. And it's beautiful, and it looks like there's no white. It's just a little bit of white sprays. It's mostly yellow and blue to get the green. And it has those, I don't know what kind of, the little leaves that are sticking out in each group of three that are typical of Hallingdal, right? And the open rose with all the petals exposed in the center. Yeah. But then when you look at the top and the front, you'll see something entirely different. And I don't know if that's Hallingdal or something else. Patty, do you know what that might be?
No.
Okay.
Certainly influenced. The influence came from something other than traditional Hallingdal.
Oh, definitely. That's why I put this in here, because one of the things that I found most amazing by my first trip to Norway was that American Rosemalers tended to categorize whatever style of painting that they were doing. And when you get to Norway, you realize that these boxes they're not really appropriate. We shouldn't be categorizing quite as much. There's a wide range of things within one style, and a lot just depended on what the artist was exposed to. So this is an example to say, okay, this doesn't fit the niche, but it's Hallingdal, at least some of it.
Yeah, I could just add that the trunk comes from a family who lived on a farm in the Voss area, so west coast.
Whatever it is, it's beautiful. And that's why we look to it. And you don't have to use every single thing. Just pick out the pieces or parts of it that you admire. And if you're not a painter, you can just appreciate the beauty and the gracefulness of it. And then we also have a little bit, I don't know how many of you realize some of the resources that are at Vesterheim. So in addition to the woodenware and being able to take pictures when you're in the museum, if you ask, or the study center, there are a ton of things in the library. I don't know how many of you have ever accessed the library. Jennifer is a goldmine of information and super helpful. So if you wish you had one of Nils's books and you don't, the Vesterheim Library has a copy or several copies. And she just happened to open it up to this page, which is 3 beautiful Hallingdal designs. And I kind of, I think there's an enlargement of the cover. That is the cover from one of Nils's books. And then there you see it's a mirror image and the flowers are all stacked, one on top of each other. And then from the yellow center tulip, he's got these big, long, raggedy, wavy, almost like a flag or a pennant, right? And he puts the flower on top of it. And then he's got a rose that's cut in half. It actually has 3 of them, the big blue one at the top, and then the 2 smaller white ones on the side. But he has small black leaves coming out and on top of that. And there are no teardrops. Yes, there are. I was going to say no teardrops like we consider them. Down in the bottom, kind of like that spider web. There are some on the curve, right? But otherwise, those leaves are not teardrops. And there are designs from the earlier Rosemalers available. And Jennifer, some of these sheets are enormous because they have them commercially printed. And so you can have access to designs from painters who are no longer either painting or alive. And if she can't take a picture of it, you're always welcome to use your camera. I think this is by Malum.
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah. And then the next set of designs is from Pat Virch, who was known for her Hallingdal and Telemark. And Pat was extremely knowledgeable about everything. And she was in such a hurry to get painting that she never took a lot of time with drawing her designs. So I've used a lot of them for inspiration and then just fixed them up, sort of like trace one side and then fold it. So I've got a mirror image. And this shows the stacked designs and how we had patterns and designs years ago, how we learned. There were no color prints. You had a black and white design and the teacher would have, sometimes Pat has, the color of the background motif. But it doesn't tell you what the detail is, doesn't show you the detail very well, or what color it is. You had to figure it out. That's a good way to learn, actually, but it's really hard. And the last is some of the records that are available that give information about where the bowl came, the artifact came from, who painted it, how old it is, all kinds of things. And sometimes it will have the translation if it's an ale bowl with a saying. So there is a lot there to access.